Puppy keeps following cop when he finds out. Why, he breaks down in tears. It started as a routine morning patrol, the kind officers forget by noon, the kind where nothing ever happens, and that's why Officer Daniel Harper almost ignored the puppy. Almost. The sun had barely cleared the rooftops when Daniel's cruiser rolled down Maple Street, tires humming softly against the pavement. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, lawns freshly cut, curtains still drawn. A single newspaper lay folded at the end of a driveway, untouched. Daniel had worked this district for 11 years. He knew its rhythms, knew which houses had barking dogs, which porches creaked when stepped on, which corners felt wrong even in daylight. This morning felt normal, until something small and brown darted into the road. Daniel's foot slammed the brake instinctively. The cruiser stopped inches short of a tiny body. For a moment, everything froze. Then the puppy looked up at him, not startled, not scared, just staring. Its ears were too big for its head. One flopped sideways. Its ribs showed faintly beneath thin fur, rising and falling too fast. And its eyes... God. Its eyes didn't belong on a puppy. They weren't playful. They weren't curious. They were desperate. Daniel opened the door slowly. "Hey, hey," he said gently, crouching down. "You okay, little guy?" The puppy didn't run. It didn't wag its tail. It took one step closer, then another, and then it sat down directly in front of him, blocking his path. Daniel frowned. "That's not normal," he muttered. Strays usually bolted. Puppies usually bounced. This one just sat there, trembling slightly, staring up at him like it had been waiting. Daniel reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a stray in the roadway. Small puppy, Maple and 3rd. Static crackled. "Copy that, Harper. Animal control's tied up. You want us to log it?" Daniel hesitated. The puppy let out a sound then, not a bark, not a whine, a low, broken cry. It came from deep in its chest, like something inside it was cracking. Daniel felt it hit him somewhere he hadn't guarded. He stood up, gently shooing. "Come on, buddy. You can't sit here. You'll get hurt." The puppy stood and followed him. 2 steps, then 3. Daniel walked back toward his cruiser. The puppy followed. He opened the door. The puppy followed. He closed it. The puppy sat again, right by his boot. Daniel exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, half smiling. "You win. I'll call someone." He turned away to speak into the radio, and the moment his back was turned, the puppy panicked. It rushed forward, grabbed the cuff of his pant leg in its mouth, and tugged, hard. Daniel spun around. "Hey!" The puppy released immediately, backing up, ears flattening in apology, but it didn't leave. Instead, it turned its head down the street, then back to Daniel, then down the street again, and cried, long, broken, urgent. Daniel's smile faded. He had seen fear before. He had seen shock. He had seen pain. This was something else. This was pleading. Before we go any further, if you believe animals feel love, loyalty, and purpose, stay with us. This story doesn't just change one life. It shatters two. And if you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because when Officer Harper finally understood why that puppy wouldn't leave him, the truth broke him. Daniel tried logic first. Maybe the puppy was lost. Maybe it thought he was safe. Maybe it just wanted food. He reached into his glove compartment and pulled out an old granola bar, breaking off a piece and setting it on the pavement. The puppy sniffed it, ignored it. Daniel frowned again. What about water? He poured some from his bottle into the lid. The puppy didn't look at it. Instead, it stepped closer to Daniel. Closer than before. So close he could feel its body shaking. Then it turned its head sharply and looked down Maple Street again. This time, it stood and started walking. It took 3 steps, stopped, looked back, its eyes locked onto Daniel's, waiting. Daniel's stomach tightened. "No," he said quietly. "You're not leading me." The puppy took another step, then another, then stopped again, looked back, cried. The sound echoed in the quiet street. A curtain across the road twitched. Somewhere, a door closed. Daniel felt the hair on his arms rise. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but his feet moved anyway. He followed. The puppy didn't rush. It didn't bolt. It walked just fast enough that Daniel had to keep pace. Every 10 steps, it stopped. Looked back, waited. If Daniel slowed, the puppy slowed. If Daniel stopped, the puppy circled back, pressing its small body against his leg like an anchor. This isn't coincidence, Daniel thought. He remembered his training. Behavioral cues, stress responses. This puppy wasn't wandering. It was navigating. They passed 3 houses, then 4. Then the neat lawns ended. The sidewalk cracked. Trees grew closer together. The air changed. Cooler. Heavier! The puppy stopped suddenly and whined. Daniel followed its gaze. Ahead, a narrow dirt path cut between 2 overgrown lots, leading toward a strip of woodland that bordered the neighborhood. Daniel had been warned about that area. Teens hung out there. People dumped trash. Once, years ago, a missing person search had started there. Daniel's hand drifted to his belt. "You don't want to go in there," he said softly. The puppy tugged at his pant leg again. "Not hard, not aggressive, just enough. Please," the puppy seemed to say. Daniel swallowed. His radio crackled. "Harper, you still with the stray?" "Yeah," he replied slowly. "Still with it." A pause. "Everything all right?" Daniel looked down at the puppy. Its eyes never left his face. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think so." A jogger slowed as Daniel stepped off the sidewalk. "Hey, officer," the man called. "Cute dog." Daniel forced a nod. "Yeah. Yours?" "No." The jogger laughed. "Looks like it chose you." Daniel didn't smile. The jogger ran on. Daniel stepped onto the dirt path. The woods swallowed the sound of the street almost instantly. Birdsong faded. Wind whispered through branches overhead. The puppy's pace quickened now. Urgency bleeding through every movement. Daniel noticed things as they walked. A torn scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush. Fresh, a scuffed footprint in the dirt, not small, not a child's. Daniel's breathing slowed, measured. "Dispatch," he said quietly into his radio. "I may have something. I'm following a possible lead near Maple. Stand by." The puppy stopped again. This time, it didn't look back. It stared ahead. Frozen. Daniel followed its gaze and saw the bag, a woman's purse, half buried beneath leaves, one strap torn clean off. Daniel's heart began to pound. He knelt, gloved hands lifting it carefully. Inside, a wallet, an ID, a phone. The screen was cracked, dark, cold. The puppy sat beside him, whining softly. Daniel closed his eyes. Slow, controlled. This puppy wasn't lost, he realized. It was begging. He stood quickly, scanning the area. Broken branches, flattened grass, a faint drag mark leading deeper into the woods. Daniel keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I need backup. Possible assault. Maple Woods access point. Send units and EMS." "Copy that," came the immediate reply. Urgency replacing routine. The puppy stood the moment Daniel did and started walking again. Faster now. No hesitation, no stops. Daniel followed, heart hammering. The woods thickened, light dimmed, the smell changed, metallic, earthy, blood. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Easy," he whispered, more to himself than the puppy. The puppy darted left suddenly, slipping between trees. Daniel pushed through branches, thorns scraping his uniform. And then, he saw her, or what he thought was her, a shape on the ground. Still. Too still. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. "Ma'am?" His voice cracked despite himself. Her skin was pale, lips blue, blood matted her hair. Daniel pressed his fingers to her neck. Waited. 1 second. 2. Then, a pulse. Faint. But there. "She's alive," he breathed. The puppy surged forward, licking her face, whining frantically. Her eyes fluttered. Barely. She whispered something. Daniel leaned closer. "My dog," she breathed. Tears blurred his vision. "You did it," he whispered to the puppy. "You saved her." Sirens wailed in the distance. The puppy curled against her chest, refusing to move. Daniel stayed there, one hand on the woman's pulse, the other resting gently on the puppy's shaking back, and for the first time in 11 years on the force, Officer Daniel Harper cried. The sirens came fast, too fast. Red and blue light sliced through the trees, flashing against bark and leaves, turning the forest into something unreal, like a nightmare refusing to end. Daniel barely noticed. His world had shrunk to the rise and fall of the woman's chest beneath his hand, and the small, shaking body curled protectively against her. "Stay with me," he whispered over and over. "You're safe now. You're safe." The puppy didn't look at him. Its eyes were locked on the woman's face, watching every breath like it was counting them, terrified one might be the last. Footsteps thundered closer. Voices, radios, the snap of latex gloves. "Here!" Daniel shouted. "Over here!" Two officers burst through the brush, weapons drawn, then froze when they saw the scene. An EMT followed close behind, skidding to her knees. "Oh my God," she murmured. Daniel shifted back slightly to give them room, but the puppy growled low in its chest, not aggressive but warning. "It's okay," Daniel said quickly. "Easy. He's protecting her." The EMT nodded, moving slowly, hands visible. "I won't touch her yet," she said softly. "Let's get a quick look." The woman moaned faintly as the EMT checked her vitals. Blood pressure low, pulse thready, hypothermic, dehydrated. "How long has she been out here?" another officer asked. Daniel shook his head. "No idea. But that puppy came and found me." All eyes turned to the small dog, mud-streaked, bloody paws, one ear torn slightly at the tip, too thin, too tired, too brave. "Unbelievable," someone whispered. As the EMT prepared a stretcher, the puppy refused to move. It planted itself against the woman's ribs, pressing close, trembling harder now that strangers surrounded them. Daniel crouched down. "Hey," he said gently. "They're here to help her. Just like you did." The puppy's eyes flicked to him for the first time since they'd entered the woods. They were wet and scared and still pleading. Daniel swallowed. He slipped off one glove and extended his hand, palm down. Slow. Calm. "You did your job," he whispered. "You were perfect." The puppy sniffed his fingers, then licked them once. Just once. Reluctantly, it stepped back. The EMT slid the stretcher underneath the woman, lifting her carefully. The puppy tried to climb back on, panicking, until Daniel scooped it up gently, holding it against his chest. "It's okay," he murmured, feeling the tiny heart racing through fur. "She's not leaving you." The puppy buried its face into his uniform and cried. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Daniel rode up front, the puppy cradled in his arms like something precious and fragile. Mud smeared his uniform, blood stained his sleeves. He didn't care. He watched through the small rear window as EMTs worked over the woman. Oxygen mask, IV, warm blankets. "She's stable," one of them called forward. "For now." Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time since the puppy had stepped into the road, he let himself breathe. At the hospital, the chaos returned. Bright lights, beeping machines, stretchers rushing past, the smell of antiseptic replacing earth and blood. A nurse approached immediately. "Sir, animals aren't allowed." "She doesn't have anyone else," Daniel said quietly. The nurse looked at the puppy, at its torn ear and muddy paws, at the way it clung to Daniel's chest like it might disappear if it let go. She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, she said softly. "That's all I can promise." Daniel followed the gurney into the trauma bay. The puppy whined as the woman was transferred to the bed. It strained in Daniel's arms, desperate to be closer. "Ma'am," Daniel said gently, stepping forward. "You're at the hospital. You're safe." Her eyes fluttered open, confused, then focused, on the puppy. "Scout!" she breathed. The puppy yelped, sharp and joyous, and twisted in Daniel's arms, reaching for her. Daniel set it down carefully. Scout leapt onto the bed, curling against her chest as best it could around wires and tubes, licking her chin, crying softly. The woman smiled weakly. You found help?" she whispered. The puppy wagged its tail once, just once, then settled, head tucked under her chin, refusing to move. The nurse wiped at her eyes and turned away. Later, much later, Daniel sat alone in the waiting room. The puppy lay at his feet now, exhausted beyond movement. Every so often it lifted its head and looked toward the hallway leading to the trauma ward, as if checking that the woman was still there, still alive. Daniel stared at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. A detective sat down beside him. "Walk me through it," she said gently. Daniel did. From the moment he almost ignored the puppy, to the way it blocked him, to the path through the woods, to the purse, the drag marks, the body on the ground, The dog never left her, Daniel finished. Not once. It left only to get help. The detective nodded slowly. We found tire tracks near the far access road. Looks like someone dumped her and left. Daniel's jaw clenched. Do we know who she is? He asked. The detective glanced at her notes. Name's Emily Carter, 28. Missing report filed last night by her sister. She went jogging with her dog and never came home. Daniel looked down at Scout. You ran all that way, he whispered. You crossed traffic. You trusted a stranger in uniform. Scout lifted its head slightly, ears twitching. It knew, the detective said quietly. Dogs know. Hours passed. Night settled heavy over the hospital. Daniel should have gone home. Another officer offered to take Scout to animal control, just for the night. Daniel had never snapped at a colleague before. He did then. No, he said flatly. Not happening. Scout didn't leave Emily's room. Not when doctors came and went. Not when nurses changed shifts. Not when the night grew quiet. Daniel sat in the corner chair, uniform wrinkled, boots still muddy, watching the rise and fall of Emily's chest, and the way Scout's paw rested gently over her heart. At some point, Emily stirred again. Her eyes opened more fully this time. She saw Daniel. You're the officer, she murmured. Daniel stood immediately. Yes, ma'am. I'm Officer Harper. You're safe. Tears welled in her eyes. My dog, she whispered, fingers trembling as they brushed Scout's fur. He wouldn't leave me, even when I told him to run. Daniel felt something break open in his chest. What happened? He asked softly. Emily swallowed. I was jogging. A man pulled up, said he needed directions. I stepped closer. He grabbed me. Her voice shook. He hit me, took my phone. I remember Scout biting him. I remember screaming. Then, the woods. He dragged me, left me. Her breathing hitched. I thought I was dying. I told Scout to go, to find help. Scout pressed closer to her, whining. He didn't want to leave, she whispered. But I begged him. I told him I loved him. Daniel turned away before she could see his tears. He listened, Daniel said. And he saved your life. Emily looked at Scout with something like awe. My good boy, she whispered. Scout licked her cheek. By morning, the story had spread. Nurses whispered about it. Doctors paused to pet Scout gently when they thought no one was looking. Officers stopped by, hats in hand. Daniel stayed. He didn't know why he couldn't leave. He just knew he couldn't. When animal control finally arrived, Daniel stepped between them and the bed. She wants him here, he said. Emily nodded weakly. Please. The supervisor hesitated, then sighed. Temporary exception, he said. But paperwork's gonna be a nightmare. Daniel didn't care. He watched Scout sleep, curled tight against Emily, still on guard even in dreams, and he realized something then. This wasn't just a rescue. This was loyalty so pure it hurt to witness. This was love with no language. This was a bond that had crossed fear, pain, and instinct, and chosen hope. Daniel rubbed his eyes. 11 years on the force. Countless calls, too many endings that went the wrong way. And yet, one small puppy had restored something in him he didn't know he'd lost. Outside the hospital room, Daniel leaned against the wall, finally allowing the weight of it all to crash over him. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, and he cried. Not quietly, not neatly. He cried for the woman who almost died alone, for the puppy who refused to let that happen, for the miracle of being in the right place at the exact right time, and for the simple, devastating truth. Sometimes heroes are small, sometimes they have 4 legs, and sometimes they save us all. Morning arrived quietly. Soft light filtered through the hospital blinds, painting pale stripes across the floor. Machines hummed in steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled. Life continued, indifferent, unstoppable. Inside room 312, time felt suspended. Emily slept. Scout did not. The puppy lay curled against her side, chin resting on the blanket, eyes open, always open. Every breath Emily took was met with a flick of Scout's ear, a subtle shift of his body, as if he were counting them, guarding them. Officer Daniel Harper stood just inside the doorway, a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Scout standing in the road, blocking him, begging. He stepped closer, careful not to wake Emily. Scout's eyes lifted immediately. They met Daniel's. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Scout's tail thumped once. Soft, controlled, permission. Daniel exhaled and crouched beside the bed. "You're still on duty," he whispered. Scout blinked slowly. Daniel reached out, hesitating, then gently scratched behind Scout's ear. The puppy leaned into the touch with a quiet sigh, one small moment of relief breaking through the vigilance. "I don't know how you did it," Daniel murmured. "Most people wouldn't have made it out of those woods. But you crossed traffic. You trusted me. You didn't give up." Scout's eyes drifted back to Emily, always back to her. Emily woke an hour later. Slowly, carefully. Pain flickered across her face before she noticed Scout. Then everything softened. "Oh," she whispered, voice rough. "Hi, my brave boy." Scout stood instantly, tail wagging now, fast, joyful, uncontained. He licked her face, her hands, whining in relief like he'd been holding his breath all night. Emily laughed weakly, then cried. Daniel stepped forward. "Good morning," he said gently. She looked up at him. "You stayed." Daniel nodded. "Couldn't leave." Emily studied him for a moment. "He chose you," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, he trusted me. That's different." Emily smiled faintly. "Scout doesn't trust easily." Later that day, detectives returned. They spoke softly, careful not to overwhelm her. Emily answered what she could. Gaps remained. Head trauma, shock, exhaustion. But enough pieces fell into place. A man pretending to be lost, a vehicle description, a partial license plate she remembered only because Scout had barked at the sound of the engine. Scout growled low when the detective repeated the man's voice, mimicking what Emily described. "That's him," she whispered. "Scout knows." The detective nodded, writing it down. "Animals remember trauma," she said. "Just like people." Scout pressed closer to Emily, body tense. Daniel watched, fists clenched. "I should have been there sooner," he thought. Someone should have. But he was there when it mattered, because of Scout. By afternoon, the story leaked. Someone snapped a photo of Scout curled protectively against Emily and posted it online. It spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. "That dog is a hero. Give him a medal. This is why dogs are family." Daniel avoided his phone. He wasn't interested in attention. He was interested in what came next, because he knew how this usually went. Recovery was long. Lives didn't snap back into place just because someone survived. And then there was Scout. Emily had no family nearby. Her sister lived 2 states away. Hospital stays cost money. Time off work meant rent overdue. Daniel watched Scout follow every movement. Nurse, doctor, visitor, always checking Emily first, as if asking, "Are you okay with this?" He pulled the charge nurse aside. "What happens when she's discharged?" he asked. The nurse sighed. "She'll need rehab, physical therapy, and, honestly," she lowered her voice, "she's going to need support." Daniel nodded slowly. That night, he stood alone on the hospital roof, city lights flickering below. Cold air bit at his face. 11 years ago, he'd joined the force believing he could make a difference. Somewhere along the way, the job had worn him down, made him careful, detached, efficient. Scout had shattered that armor. Daniel made a decision then, one that scared him more than any call ever had. 2 days later, Emily was stronger, still weak, still bruised, still healing, but alive and laughing softly as Scout attempted to climb into the narrow hospital bed beside her, despite rules and wires and common sense. "He thinks he's still tiny," she smiled. Daniel leaned against the wall. "He earned it." Emily looked up at him, serious now. "Officer Harper." "Daniel, I need to ask you something." He straightened. "Of course." She hesitated, then spoke. "They told me I might need to go to a rehab facility for a while. My sister's trying to come, but it'll take time." Daniel nodded, heart pounding. "And Scout," she continued. "He can't come with me. Not at first." Scout lifted his head, sensing the shift. Emily's voice broke. "I don't want him locked in a kennel. He's been through enough. Daniel didn't let her finish. I'll take him. he said. Emily stared. Temporarily, he added quickly. Until you're home, until you're ready. I promise I'll bring him to see you. Every day if I can. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. Scout stood, walked over to Daniel, and placed one paw on his knee. Daniel laughed shakily. I think that's a yes. Emily nodded. Thank you, she whispered. For believing him. For following him. Daniel looked at Scout. No, he said softly. Thank him. Scout wagged his tail once and sat beside Daniel, like it was already decided. The first night Scout stayed at Daniel's apartment, he didn't sleep. Neither did Daniel. Scout paced from room to room, sniffing, checking, circling back to the door. Every sound made his ears snap up. Daniel lay on the couch, watching. You're not alone, he said quietly. Scout paused, looked at him, then walked over and curled up beside the couch, resting his head on Daniel's boot, still facing the door, guarding someone who wasn't there. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He reached down and rested his hand gently on Scout's back. You don't have to be brave tonight, he whispered. Scout exhaled slowly. Just a little. In the days that followed, Daniel brought Scout to the hospital every evening. Emily's strength returned inch by inch. Scout's tail wagged faster each visit, and Daniel began to notice something else. Scout was changing him. He talked more, listened more, felt more. Colleagues noticed. You smiling now? One joked. Daniel shrugged. Guess I forgot how. One evening, as Daniel prepared to leave the hospital, Emily called out softly, Daniel? He turned. Whatever happens, she said, eyes steady. You're part of our story now. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. Scout pressed against his leg. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, washing the world in gold. Daniel realized something as he watched Scout walk confidently beside him. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a bond forged in fear, sealed by loyalty, and strengthened by something rarer than courage. Trust. The arrest happened 3 weeks later. Daniel was on patrol when the call came through, another officer's voice tight with adrenaline. We've got him. Suspect matched Emily Carter's description. Pulled over near Route 9. He tried to run. Daniel pulled over to the curb and closed his eyes. Scout sat in the passenger seat beside him, ears perking at the shift in Daniel's breathing. They got him, Daniel whispered. Scout tilted his head. Daniel reached over and scratched behind his ear. You did that, he said. You helped put him away. Scout wagged his tail once, then settled again, his work apparently already done. Emily watched the arrest footage from her rehab room. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. Scout sat beside her on the bed, body pressed close, eyes on the screen. When the man was handcuffed, Scout let out a low sound, something between a growl and a sigh. It's over, Emily whispered. Scout rested his head on her lap. Recovery was not a straight line. Some days Emily smiled and joked with nurses. Other days she couldn't bring herself to sit up. Nightmares came without warning. Loud noises made her flinch. Silence frightened her even more. Scout never left her side. When she cried, he pressed closer. When she woke gasping from sleep, he licked her hands until her breathing slowed. When physical therapy hurt too much, he sat at the edge of the mat, watching her with quiet encouragement. Daniel witnessed it all. He visited after shifts, brought coffee, listened more than he spoke. One night, Emily looked at him and said, I don't think I would have survived this without him. Daniel nodded. I know. She studied him carefully. And without you, Daniel swallowed. I just followed. Emily smiled. Sometimes that's everything. The day Emily was discharged, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. Daniel pulled the car up to the entrance, Scout sitting proudly in the back seat, a new red collar around his neck. Emily stepped outside slowly, leaning on a cane. Scout exploded with joy. He leapt, carefully, tail a blur, whining, circling, licking her hands like he hadn't seen her in years. Daniel laughed, stepping back to give them space. You ready to go home? He asked. Emily nodded. Home was small, temporary, a borrowed apartment while repairs were made to her old place. But Scout inspected it thoroughly, sniffing every corner, then sat beside Emily and wagged his tail. Approved. That night, Emily cooked for the first time since the attack. It was simple. Soup, bread. Daniel sat at the small table, Scout lying between their chairs. "To Scout," Emily said softly, lifting her glass of water. Daniel raised his. "To Scout." Scout thumped his tail against the floor. Weeks passed, then months. Life resumed, slowly, unevenly. Emily returned to work part-time. Therapy continued. Healing deepened. Scout grew stronger. His coat thickened. His torn ear healed into a small, crooked scar. Daniel found himself there more often than not. Fixing shelves. Walking Scout when Emily was tired. Staying late, talking quietly while Scout slept at their feet. One evening, Emily said, "You know he listens for your car." Daniel blinked. "What? 10 minutes before you arrive, he goes to the door." She smiled. Every time, Daniel looked down at Scout, who was pretending not to understand. The official ceremony happened on a warm spring morning. Small crowd, local news, a banner reading Hero K9, even though Scout wasn't trained, wasn't enlisted, wasn't anything but loyal. Daniel stood beside Emily as the police chief knelt and placed a medal on Scout's collar. "This dog demonstrated extraordinary courage," the chief said, "and reminded us why we do this job." Scout licked his face. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Emily wiped her eyes. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Emily turned to Daniel. "I've been thinking," she said. Daniel waited. "You don't have to bring Scout back anymore." Daniel's heart dropped. "I mean," she continued quickly, smiling through tears, "he's already home." Scout walked over and sat between them. Daniel knelt, hands resting on Scout's shoulders. "You hear that?" he whispered. "You did good." Scout leaned into him. That night, Daniel returned to his apartment alone. Scout stayed with Emily. The place felt different without him. Quieter. Emptier. Daniel sat on the couch and stared at the door. For the first time in months, nothing blocked his path. Nothing followed him. Nothing needed him. And somehow, that hurt. His phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Scout's sitting by the door. "Won't stop staring at it." Another message, seconds later. "He thinks you forgot something." Daniel smiled sadly. Then he stood, grabbed his jacket, and went back. Scout didn't hesitate when Daniel opened the door. He ran straight into Daniel's arms, whining, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Emily laughed softly. "I guess that answers that." Daniel held Scout for a long moment. "I don't know what this is," he said quietly, "but I know I don't want to lose it." Emily nodded. "Neither do I." Scout lay down between them. Content. Whole. Some stories end with rescue. This one didn't. It continued. Every walk, every quiet night, every shared silence. A puppy followed a cop because he had no other choice, because love demanded it, and in doing so, he saved a life, then changed 3. Forever. Years later, Officer Daniel Harper would still remember the sound. Not the sirens, not the radios, not the chaos, but the cry. That small, broken sound a frightened puppy made in the middle of a quiet street. The morning everything changed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. It became real. Emily still had bad days. Some nights, sleep didn't come easy. Loud footsteps behind her made her tense. Dark trails through wooded parks were still impossible. Daniel understood. He never rushed her. Scout never left her side. On days when Emily couldn't face the world, Scout curled beside her on the couch, warm and solid and alive. On nights when memories crept in, Scout pressed against her until her breathing slowed. Daniel watched it happen, again and again. He had seen bravery on the job. This was devotion. One evening, nearly a year after the rescue, Daniel stood in Emily's kitchen, rolling up his sleeves to wash dishes. Scout lay on the floor, chin on his paws, watching both of them like a quiet guardian. "You ever think about that day?" Emily asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Every day. What do you think would have happened if you'd driven past him?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "I don't let myself finish that thought," he said finally. Scout lifted his head at the sound of Daniel's voice. Emily reached down and scratched behind Scout's ear. "He wouldn't have let you," she said. "Not really." Daniel smiled. "You're probably right." Spring turned into summer. Emily healed enough to jog again, not alone. Scout trotted beside her, alert but relaxed, tail high, ears tuned to every sound. Daniel followed behind at first, then farther back as Emily's confidence returned. One morning, Emily stopped mid-run and turned. Daniel jogged up. "Everything okay?" She smiled. "I forgot I was afraid." Scout wagged his tail. Daniel felt his eyes burn. The plaque went up quietly. No press, no ceremony, just a small metal sign at the edge of the woods where everything began. Because one dog refused to give up, a life was saved. Daniel stood beside Emily as she read it. Scout sat at their feet. A breeze moved through the trees, gentle and unthreatening. The woods no longer felt like a place of fear. They felt closed. The adoption paperwork came next. Not that Scout needed it. He had chosen his family long ago. Still, Daniel stood beside Emily at the shelter, hand hovering as the pen was passed to her. "You sure?" she asked him. Daniel nodded. "He already belongs to you." Emily signed. Scout barked once, sharp and joyful, then leaned against her leg. Done. On the anniversary of the rescue, Daniel took the day off. They returned to Maple Street together. The sun was warm, the road quiet. Scout stopped at the exact spot where he had first stepped into traffic. He looked up at Daniel, then at Emily, then sat. Daniel knelt slowly, emotion rising unexpectedly. "You remember," he whispered. Scout wagged his tail. Emily knelt beside them, wrapping her arms around both. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Daniel shook his head. "He's the one you thank." Scout licked both their faces. That night, Daniel sat alone on his balcony. Scout lay at his feet, older now, grayer around the muzzle, slower to stand, but still watching, always watching. Daniel looked down at him. "You know," he said quietly, "I spent years thinking my badge was the thing that saved people." Scout lifted his head. "But it wasn't the badge," Daniel continued. "It was listening. It was stopping. It was following when something felt wrong." Scout's tail thumped softly. Daniel smiled through tears. "You taught me that." Scout rested his head against Daniel's leg. Somewhere out there, people still hurried past things they didn't understand, still ignored signs that didn't make sense, still mistook instinct for inconvenience. But one morning, one puppy refused to be ignored. He followed, he blocked, he begged, and because one man listened, a woman lived, a dog found his purpose, and a hardened cop learned something he would carry for the rest of his life. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're small, they're shaking, they're brave beyond words, and they follow you until you finally understand why.